Hey, fellow nerds. We often debate when was the worst time to be alive in the subcontinent. Some people debate it is during the British era, and some people debate it was during the Mughal Empire, and some real history nerds might say it was during the attack of the Huns that ended the golden age of the Gupta Empire. But I would like to posit one more option, and that is the Tughlaq Dynasty of the Delhi Sultanate. It followed right after the Khilji Dynasty in the latter half of the 14th century. Why would you call it that? Wasn't Khilji's rule also terrible? Well, somehow it got a lot worse. How so? To begin with, let's talk about the religious persecution. Remember how Alauddin Khilji started levying the jizya tax? Mohammad Bin Tughlaq increased taxes to everyone, including the Muslim farmers, from a measly 20% to a back-breaking 50%. On top of that, non-Muslims had to pay jizya tax, separate from the state tax. And it was a flat fee under Khilji. Well, Tughlaq multiplied that flat fee by 10 times in some districts and 20 times in some other districts. As if that wasn't enough, jizya had to be paid in coins. But on top of that, the non-Muslims had to also give up 50% of their crops come the harvest season. This caused many Hindu farmers and landowners to abandon their land and their work and hide in forests and become bandits. And this caused a famine that took over the whole empire. There were reports of cannibalism and people eating horses to survive. And Ibn Battuta, who came from the Maghreb region of Africa, reported that people would cut their own foot and arms to feed their families. That is horrifying. Indian subcontinent is a land of plenty. Here, the famines are rare. It never happened under the mismanagement of the Mamluk dynasty or the Khilji dynasty, and it would not happen until all the way under the British. At least not to this extent. And the British were a colonial empire that their whole purpose was to extract resources and exploit the locals. The famine was the system working successfully. Tughlaqs, on the other hand, were living here. How incompetent does one have to be to cause something like this to happen? This is not even the end of his incompetence. To fund the expansion of his empire, he introduced fiat currency. What that means is that before this, currencies were based on the value of the items they were printed on or struck on, whether it would be the weight of the gold, silver or copper used. Fiat currency means that it is currency based on the trust that people have on the kingdom. Their coins were made of copper with numbers denoting the value of the coin itself instead of like different weights of gold, silver and copper. This allowed them to print as many coins as needed to fund their expansion, but on the other hand, this led to rampant counterfeiting. Hindus that had to pay the insane jizya tax did so by minting their own coin. Multiple Hindu households would mint these coins and share them with their neighbors to help them pay their share of jizya tax. And this sharing was not limited by caste. People from all castes received support, and since people from the lower caste were disproportionately affected by these policies, they received the most support. That's surprisingly wholesome. What the hell? Indeed, that's how most Hindus survived these apocalyptic events. They united. Regional differences, caste differences, and sectarian divisions meant nothing when it came to helping a fellow out. And they were going to need all the help they could get, since every time they rebelled, the Sultan ordered destruction. One of his farmans says that every peasant should be put to death and the whole countryside should be ravaged and indiscriminately plundered. So many people were killed under his tyranny that whole regions were emptied out. And if you thought that if you converted to Islam, things would be better, well, think again. His policy of changing to fiat currency caused runaway inflation. And when he rolled it back, he had to buy all of these coins back from the people. That caused the coffers of the empire to empty. And since most of the Hindus were either running away, rebelling, or making even more counterfeit coins, who would they tax then? Well, obviously the Muslims. The increase in taxes caused even the Muslims to join the rebellion. And what did he do to these Muslim rebels? Well, he tortured them to death. Okay, you might think that if you are one of his inner circle people, you might be spared from all of this shenanigans. Well, not even you would be spared. Halfway through his reign, he decided that he wanted to change his capital from Delhi to a random fort in the middle of the Deccan called Devgiri that he renamed to Tughlaq. Well, I mean, it is a baller fort and it is impenetrable by anyone else and is a very good place to project power in the south. I get it. But shifting his capital caused a lot of the nobles to lose their wealth and some of them to even die. And soon he realized his mistake, so he decided to reverse his decision. But by that point, most of the nobles had settled in Tughlaq and they refused to return to Delhi. This policy caused Delhi, which was one of the most vibrant and most populated cities in the world, to turn into a ghost town. When does it end? Well, Mohammad Bin Tughlaq ruled for 20 years, to be replaced by his nephew called the Firoz Shah Tughlaq of Firoz Shah Tughlaq fame. This was after a succession crisis, of course. And during this succession crisis, a lot of his empire broke away. To the south, Vijayanagar Empire popped up, which became a bastion of tolerance and safety. People from all over the subcontinent flocked there to seek protection from persecution. And in the northern half of the Deccan, the Deccan Sultanate started, which despite having Muslim rulers was a lot more tolerant when compared to Delhi Sultanate. Even places like Bengal, Sindh and Multan broke away from the empire, leaving only the core most area of the empire to the Delhi Sultanate. And his nephew, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, was not incompetent. He consolidated power, built infrastructure and outlawed torture. He created employment bureaus to help the unemployed, and he created welfare policies that helped widows. Yay! But if you have learnt one thing from the last two videos, it's that incompetent rulers in Delhi Sultanate are actually better news than competent ones. I have been hiding something about Mohammad Bin Tughlaq this whole time. It's that he was comparatively very tolerant towards non-Muslims when compared to the other Delhi Sultans. How so? Well, if you managed to pay your jizya tax under him, you could practice your religion freely in any way you want. From festivals to loud celebrations to proselytizing, all was allowed. He even had debates with Jain and Hindu scholars in his court, and he even registered farmans to protect Jains from other invasions. He even pardoned the people who forged the currency to pay the jizya tax. He centralized education for all, including Hindus. This gave Hindus an increased economic opportunity. A lot of his irrational decisions can be explained by the economic realities of the time. You see, Europe was going through Black Plague, and so they could not import Indian material quite as much. And the rest of Asia was reeling from the invasions of Mongols. So a lot of the world economy was not functioning. Not a lot of money could be raised by exports or imports. So the taxes had to be raised. A lot of his policies were unfairly criticized because the sources that wrote these histories are known to actually dislike him. Firoz Shah Tughlaq, on the other hand, had no reason to be the menace he was. He decided to appease the previously alienated Muslim scholars and started going out of his way to persecute non-Muslims. He lowered taxes on Muslims and figured out a way to raise even more taxes on non-Muslim populations. What? Even more tax? He converted many Hindus under the threat of death, and he burnt proselytizing priests alive. He even killed the people who tried to rebuild any destroyed temples. All of this put together caused the largest mass conversion of Hindus into Muslims until this point. And when you think that that's all the worst things that could happen, well, Firoz Shah Tughlaq dies, leaving another succession crisis behind, which ends up with a lot of bloodshed, only for things to get worse as the devil himself arrived. Timur the Lame was one of the most ruthless conquerors in the world. Hailing from West Asia, he was half Mongol and half Turkic. And he had a limp. That did not stop him from spreading his empire in every direction and causing destruction untold. It is said that he invaded India because Tughlaq Dynasty was not harsh enough on Hindus. What? How? How could it have been worse? Timur crossed Indus with a force estimated to be around 90,000. His campaign through northern India was marked with systematic massacre and plundering of cities such as Tulamba and Multan. They offered little resistance to him because of weakened defenses. Timur's forces encountered the Sultan's forces near Delhi. These forces had war elephants armored with chainmail and poisoned tusks. How could they ever be defeated? Well, Timur used advanced tactics like burning horses and donkeys and sending them to the elephants, causing panic, and this routed the Delhi Sultanate army. After that, he entered Delhi. For 3 days, his soldiers indulged in looting, raping, and killing everyone that they saw. The city was left in ruins. Some estimates say that up to 100,000 or a lakh people were killed in Delhi at that point. Only the Muslims were spared and Hindus were killed indiscriminately. Towers of skulls were built and bodies were left behind for animals to consume. It took over a century to rebuild Delhi, only returning to its former glory under the reign of Akbar. The Delhi Sultanate became a shadow of its former self, and the invasion entered the common folklore as being something akin to the apocalypse. The survivors carried the trauma of this for generations to come. Even local Muslim sources at the time describe the invasion as evil because, contrary to popular belief, Muslims actually liked their Hindu neighbors and did not want to watch them being raped or looted or murdered. Wow, the 14th century was a whole century of, and then it got worse. And somehow, India wasn't the worst hit in the whole world. The whole world seems to be on fire at this point. I mean, Black Death was happening at this point in Europe, and Timur caused destruction in every direction he went. China was experiencing its own set of turbulences, and all of this was on the backs of the Mongols conquering the world. It seems it sucked to be human in 14th century in general, honestly. There are other times it sucked to be a human as well. A lot of disasters, economic downturns, and wars of destructions coincided across the world a lot of the times. That's because a lot of the world's economy and weather was more linked to each other than we give it credit for. In 14th century, it was the downturn in imports from Europe that caused the southern kingdoms of India to weaken enough to be conquered by Tughlaq Dynasty. And it was the Delhi Sultanate Empire overextending itself for very little economic gain that caused the coffers to empty, and that caused the exuberant taxation, as well as Mohammad Bin Tughlaq trying out the fiat currency. And the 7-year famine, well, it coincided with many other such famines across the world. Yes, it was exacerbated by Mohammad Bin Tughlaq's policies, but it was something that occurred naturally across the world. The behavior of Firoz Shah Tughlaq and Timur, on the other hand, is a lot less explainable. Anyway, let's talk about relatively more positive things next time, and let's talk about the Vijayanagar Empire in the next video.